Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Schamberger, and in this final video lecture, we will wrap things up by examining really what is the future of communication and sport, and then most notably as how we see it, sports media. So let's get started. This will be brief. So this particular talk is in alignment with these learning objectives, where hopefully you'll be able to explain even further and even richer the relationship between sports and media, whether it would be the things that have worked well throughout time, as well as examining what the relationship is that when it's rocky between the two. And we're definitely seeing some of that in relation to the disruption of the coronavirus. And then also, would you be able to discuss some of the differences between sports journalism and the hard news journalism? I think many of you do, but really, what does sports journalism look like? What will it look like? There are some uh, predictions out there that the world of sports journalism is no longer needed, and I know that is painful to hear. It's painful for me to say. But again, the coronavirus has really disrupted things and has really given pause as to the necessity of certain news beats at this point in time, sports journalism being one of them. So can it rebound? All right, putting a sports metaphor there. Something for you to think about as we move through this. You know, throughout the semester, we have examined media and sports, communication and sports. And as we have discussed at certain times, there are certain changes that have really occurred that affect both industries. Technology has really ramped up media. It's also done the same thing with sports and the visibility of sports in the media as a result of technology changes. The economic models have evolved over time. As we know, media is a business function. That's why, suitably, we are housed in the College of Business at Murray State University. Sports also operates on economic models, more so maybe on the collegiate and professional levels, but it really does on all levels. The finances have to be there for sports to occur as an organized activity. And of course, we have examined how even economic models can distort some issues we've examined in sports. Gender issues, big one right there. Racial issues, all of those. Social networking and new media have really fragmented audiences over time to where, really is television the best way to really consume sports information anymore. We're getting a lot of our information through the organizations that we have relationships with online. Many of us follow ESPN, for instance. Many of us follow our favorite sports teams on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever the social networking channel might be. And then some of the new forms of media that are emerging. Again, it's all fragmenting. So how do we catch those audiences? That's a big challenge for sports media. Specific to sports itself as an institution, there's growth in the church sports leagues. We're going to see a lot more of that. Even once we get through coronavirus, there's also a growth in youth sports. That has always been the case for about the past 15 years to 2 decades, but still it continues to grow. Esports is really growing. So those are things to watch. And then some issues that affect sports as an institution, but can definitely have implications for sports media. The issue surrounding performance enhancement drugs. Um, uh, we're often seeing that being covered in sports journalism, especially with some of the investigative pieces. Will that continue to grow? Is that something that fans are interested in knowing? In addition, we're seeing growth in what we call fan posting, being able to have that direct access to athletes, um, professional athletes, even some of the high profile collegiate athletes. So, the fact that people are able to communicate more so with their favorite athletes, that's something that we, of course, as we have examined historically, had not been fully seen. And thanks to all the changes in media, we're now able to do that. And there's a lot more. Those are just that basically just resemble the tip of the iceberg. So there are plenty more that I'm sure you are thinking about. So sports media is rather compounded by these issues here. The internet is the big chunk of it nowadays. We watch some of the updates on Twitter. We're probably live streaming games. We might be attending one game and live streaming another. I've done that, especially when the Wildcats basketball game might be interfering with Racer basketball. So what do? Well, we're attending the Racer basketball game at the same time we're streaming the Kentucky game. You know, so the internet is playing a big role in our sports media lives. Again, I talked about the social networking. Economic models also shape sports media. So much so that it's starting, of course, we have seen what it's done to sports journalism. Sports journalists in many of the professional news organizations have been furloughed, laid off, because there hasn't been a whole lot of sports to cover. Even though we've got things coming up in the fall, but right now, many of the corporate news leaders don't see a need for sports journalism. And that's really difficult for me to say. So we've got this continuum that really is all driven by what happens on the internet, what's going to occur there. So that is something to watch as well. So really the future of sports media. You know, sports, we have discussed from the very first week of the semester how sports is fun. If you remember back to maybe some of your childhood days when you did play for certain leagues, it was fun. And then as you grew older, it became, you know, educational. You may have found a sport that you really enjoyed to the point where you wanted to learn more. You wanted to consume as much as you could about that sport. And there's also opportunities for leadership in sports, whether you become a leader on the field, on the court. It doesn't necessarily have to be by captain status, but you know, definitely how are you influencing your teammates? How are you being the cheerleader for them? How are you being the fighter for them? So it all became educational as well. And it continues to grow that way. For media, we have seen how the media have been innovative, inventive. It is a vital and diverse industry. It is vital for sports to exist, if you think about it, especially again in the commodification of sports. You've got to have the media to help drive that. And it is a diverse industry, the media. We are beginning to see more and more women emerge as sports reporters, which is great. And not just the gender aspect, we are beginning to see slowly though, but we are starting to see some representation from other races and nationalities being a part of this whole puzzle of sports media. So again, I'm hoping you're seeing the symbiotic relationship of sports and media. We've talked this quite a bit, and we've examined it through a number of the lenses, both in class and in this conversion to online learning. So that brings me to this final question for you, and something that I want you to think about, not just in completion of this module, but even after this course. You know, what does the future hold for sports media? So right now, while it might be sleeping at the moment because sports activity is lull, but come fall, hopefully, when things can resume to some kind of normalcy, we'll be able to see sports media back on its feet and helping to drive the sports industry. Likewise, the sports that we watch on TV or even or even if we attend a game, but knowing how the media influences what we're seeing in sports, and then how do we participate as fans? How do we participate as consumers? And how do we participate as sports producers? So really, I'm hoping you're seeing how all of these themes that we have talked about for the past 16 weeks of the spring 2020 semester have now have reached this culminating question. What does the future hold for sports media? Thank you for your attention. Thank you for hanging on for the rest of the spring semester. And I do hope that you were able to gather some really useful information, whether some of you are going to pursue sports media as a career, or even some of you who are pursuing just sports. You know, I'm hoping you're seeing how media can be a part of your lives, and you do have the power to help shape that. Thank you for your attention.